Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from various locations here in the city of Detroit, powered by the Eastside Community Network and sponsored by none other than the Ford Foundation, now a content partner to the new Where's Detroit publication. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen to us on. We drop a new episode every week, so make sure that you turn on those notifications. Today, we have a special guest with us. We have Tristan Taylor, who has been really on the front lines and leading some of the police brutality protests here in the city of Detroit. We are coming now off the heels of an incident that happened over the weekend with police in Southwest Detroit with protesters. Tristan, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
And
thank you so much for having me, especially with all this background noise. We're in the middle of a march, so thank you.
well, thank you for joining us. Tristan, before we get started on this, I think Orlando, I met you in a whole nother guise when you were doing work with Charlevoix Villages. And so people don't know who Tristan Taylor is, but I was like, he's been causing trouble for a minute, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, we know Tristan Taylor. I've been on the receiving end of a good Tristan Taylor lashing. So
it's all with love and it's with appreciation. Community, it's different because, with community, you just got to hash it out. And it's the love that we all bring from where we, are from the city, right?
Yeah.
You never lashed me, so I'm lucky. But what I do remember is going to a meeting, and that's when they were doing planning for, was it Island View Community?
The Island View RFP, the Island View RFP, yeah.
And before I met you, I read about these demands that Charlevoix Villages had put together. And I read them and I was like, wow, these are pretty awesome. And then people thought that ECN had done it. And I can't take credit for your work. That's something you've done. So can you just give us a little brief background so people know who you are in relation to activism in Detroit?
Sure. And by the way, shout out to ECN for being supportive of Charlevoix Village Association, even having those demands and being able to voice them. But I'm born and raised in this city. Actually went to McKenzie High School, and I became active defending affirmative action actually while a junior in high school. So I'm 37 now, so I've been around for a little bit. And recently, my concern has been around housing, and gentrification and displacement. Especially the east side of Detroit. It's been really hit hard through the tax foreclosures. We all know the story. And so, now that we saw like all of these improvements coming in, people just wanted to make sure that we were still part of it. So that's really been for the last 3 or 4 years my personal focus. But I have experience defending and organizing on public education around immigrant rights and police brutality as well.
Okay, so thank you for that intro. So what's happening? How did you get started in this? And what has been happening? Because this has been going on for a few weeks now, right?
Yeah, we're day 32, Brian. Day 32 on the streets.
Can we just say that he's marching right now as he's giving us this interview? I just want to let the listeners know.
Yeah, no, you can you see him? Although you can't see him down there. We'll get to him. Here's some of the folks.
Wow. So what, from your vantage point, these last 32 days, what have you seen? What's happening?
Well, I think we've seen a reawakening of a sort of people, who've really been struggling and fighting against systemic inequality and racism, finally having the attention of the world, I think on the heels of an epidemic that we're still in the midst of, that's why I'm wearing my mask, is seeing George Floyd murdered like that, it was just too much. And so we've seen a reawakening of the world, really, especially the nation and young people who are saying that enough is enough. We actually are fighting for Black lives. We think people in this country are valued and deserve to be fought for and be treated equal.
So when I say power to the people, what do you say?
Well, I say power to the people.
All right.
And what we've seen, what is very interesting, is really for the first time in a long time, a youthful and integrated movement fighting against racism and inequality. And so we've seen, especially in a place that we live in that's hyper segregated, both within the city but throughout the metro area, are coming together people in a way really that hasn't been comparable since the civil rights movement. I think of like the freedom rides, or the campaigns of people from the north going to the south, something similar like that. But at the same time, of course, Black voices being in the front.
Tristan, I want to ask you about your mask. Your mask says defund police, and that has been a rallying call for demonstrations all across the nation, and even now we're learning around the globe. Tell us what you mean when you say defund police.
Well, for example, I think we need to start having a serious conversation about security, a conversation really that people in the neighborhood have always tried to have about stable housing and quality jobs and just what that does to people and the environment around them, and how that's the best preventative measure against crime, right? And so instead of buying $1 million worth of facial recognition technology or rubber bullets or militarized tanks, we could be spending our money on resources, making sure we have community centers, making sure we have like job training programs that our young people desperately need. Yeah. And part of it is what defunding ultimately means should be up for the community, but it means we prioritize keeping a real safe and secure environment over aggressive physical terror that we see dispensed throughout the country by police departments.
Yeah. So when I talk to a lot of people about defunding police, especially senior citizens, I hear a lot of terror and a lot of pushback. I was talking to a friend on Saturday who said that she has been attacked by people who have, when she's brought up the whole concept of defund police, how do you explain that to my 87-year-old mother?
Sure. And the way I will explain it is to say, look, we know that crime is a real thing. And we don't mean to take away from that. We just know that policing as it is now doesn't deal with crime, or at least it doesn't help prevent it, and it doesn't really keep our communities safe. And so what we need is to make sure that people don't have the excuse of having to be a part of petty crimes or the underground economy, but also that we have social services so that people who have anger have a place to put that instead of internalize that and for that to explode.
So there are folks who agree with that and who agree with that reallocation of resources. I happen to be one of those people. But what do you say to folks who take issue with the term defund police? I'm also one of those people who doesn't like the term. What do you say to people who say, let's figure out better language around this campaign?
Well, because defund the police, I think it says, one, in clear terms that we're deprioritizing police forces and physical policing of communities, especially Black and brown bodies, and that we're reinvesting those dollars somewhere else. Because if we're taking money out of the police force, we're taking money out of it. There's no, cutting it out, right? Like some people are like, oh, we need better training for police officers. There's actually more money. And what we also see is the issue isn't training. The issue is in enforcement of that training, because we see a lot of police officers just disregard basic standard procedures. For example, chokeholds. Most cities actually ban chokeholds, and yet we see police officers use it all the time.
So, I mean, I completely agree with that. When you talk about reprioritizing, I think that's a term that many people can get behind. Defund too many people sounds like you're going to take away all of the funding. I think that the other thing is that in law and order circles, remember the mayor's budget that was introduced about 3 years ago in March before this pandemic took hold? And the mayor announced
3 months ago.
it feels like 3 years ago. Come on, it does not feel like this year. March.
I knew what you were talking about, but yeah. I know.
You know what?
Because my mind went back. I'm like, wait, 3 years.
3 years ago? I was like, it's the same thing. It's the same mess.
I got you, Donna. I'm sorry, Donna. I got you.
I don't even, I was like 3 years younger when all of this stuff happened, okay?
Now that is true. Me too. All of us were.
It put me through some stuff. But, 3 years ago when the mayor introduced this budget, he talked about increasing police pay and increasing investment in policing, which many people think sounds good. And as a matter of fact, the one thing that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders agree on seems to be pay police officers more money. And if we pay police officers more money, they will stop killing us. Will that work?
Well,
how much money do I have to pay somebody to not kill black people?
I know, that's a good question. Also, it's so funny how we can have that attitude towards police but not teachers or social workers, right, or counselors or schools. It's so funny to me that when it comes to that, we're like, oh, no, you just gotta make do with what you have. But for the police, oh, those poor police. I think that, again, so long as police are able to act with impunity and there are no actual repercussions for them stepping on the line, it doesn't matter how much you pay them or don't pay them. It's a question of really setting boundaries. And the problem is what we're doing, to be honest, is rewarding bad behavior. We talk about how that's not good in raising children. That's also not good in making sure cops treat communities of color properly.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry, Donna.
I'm just gonna have one question real quickly. Can we defund the amount of money the city budgets every year to pay off people when they sue? What do they call those agreements they reach? Come on, help me with the word. The settlements, yeah, the settlement fund that it's like $20 million a year we're spending in settlements. Am I mistaken?
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And so it's actually a pretty huge, and what really is striking is how much money we spend in settlements, but how little that's seen in the way that even the policers who are involved in those incidents have to respond to those settlements. They still keep their jobs a lot of times, right? They're still on the force. Sometimes they even get promotions. So it's, again, we're rewarding bad behavior. Like Chief Craig has a total of, I think, 70 officers who the courts have said are untrustworthy. And I don't understand how you keep people employed as police officers if they can't even testify in court.
Right.
I just don't understand that. I just don't.
I think we also have to interrogate the power or the separation of powers between the authority of the police chief and the police union when it comes to disciplinary actions. One of the things that you said to me that was striking was our tendency to want to pay police more because they deserve more. And we never really have that conversation and the political will to do that for social workers, teachers, etc. Who I might add have years and years worth of technical training and clinical training. And police go through academy for how long? 3 to 6 months.
Right.
There's an inequity there. What do you say to that?
I say that it really shows right now the nature of policing and how it really isn't about de-escalation, right? Because you can't teach seriously de-escalation and having people be a part of a community in just 3 months, right? That's a continual process, right? And then often the training that is given is just so disconnected from the neighborhoods and the community. Don't forget, we have a police force, a large percent of which don't even live inside the city, right? So I think that it's highly problematic that we expect so much in terms of how much we should pay police officers, and how much weight police unions have, which I have to say is not comparable to other unions who have been fighting for decades for better pay. And I think that comes into how we're talking about systemic inequality at this point, because the police are often the people who enforce it to a large degree. And they're the people who give protection to the people who write laws that don't all the time affect people positively. And I think that gives them an unfair and undue advantage.
So I learned this new term, and I'm really excited to use it: giglio impaired, right? And that's
never heard of it.
When an officer has a history, and you talked about this earlier, you referred to, without using the term, a history of lying on the stand, that they are impaired based on the Brady-Giglio Supreme Court decision, such that they cannot appear as a witness. And in the criminal justice system, that's called giglio impaired. So an officer can have an issue. It can have an issue because they've lied on the stand, and they should not be able to give testimony. Many of them can't give testimony because there's so much evidence, but they still have a job. And then the other thing that I've learned is that police officers there's a rule they must have their body cams on at all times. But when they don't have their body cams on, they're still allowed to testify, even though they didn't follow the rules. And so we have these situations there that I think we need to get to that speak to the lack of accountability of policing to the truth, right? And when you don't have police officers who are required to act in the truth, then you have a situation where there's no trust. And then the other thing is that the unions seem to be responsible for protecting police officers and maintaining this thin blue line, the silence, the omerta that takes place within police departments, that also takes place with organized crime. So when people talk about, police officers love to talk about people in the hood who don't snitch, no snitch culture. Whose no snitch culture is greater? Somebody in my neighborhood or police no snitch culture? Because I'm thinking theirs is worse.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, we saw it today. We saw Chief Craig offer up some pretty damning lies, to be honest, and stories, as if no one saw the multiple videos of that police cruiser plowing through protesters. And instead of saying, hey, we have a police officer that overreacted, he did the wrong thing, really sorry about that, we can cut the whole story about plots and hammers and things that we have no proof of, by the way, even though, so you're expecting me to believe that you base your decision on how to police peaceful protesters based on the rumor, and not even based on the precedent that the protesters themselves have set in peacefully protesting for like weeks on end? No, that's the no snitching culture that is highly problematic, and it's especially problematic to come from someone who's supposed to be the leader of that institution.
So I have a question, because he likes to talk about how many people are out there with you protesting who do not live in Detroit. When he does that, does any of the press ever ask him how many of his police officers don't live in Detroit? Because it seems like we're hearing an imbalanced story. If you have non-Detroiters marching, you also have non-Detroiters policing. My question is this: did the police officer who drove his car into that crowd, did he live in Detroit?
I don't know. That's a good. No one asked him. I know he was a white police officer.
We should find out where he lives.
I don't know where he lives. Someone even tried to get his badge, and he told them, "Don't worry about it."
Oh. So you don't know who he is yet.
We don't even know who he is.
Oh, you forget that at the very least, the Detroit Police Commission should ask who he is and find out who he is. And now I just want to know if he lives in Detroit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And and you know, the other thing is, it's so funny how, you know, again, my history with Charlevoix Village Association, you know, we've been told that we just will drive the white people away if we ask for all of these things. And all of a sudden, we're concerned about white people protesting in Detroit and are amazed that they're here. Like, we
We
don't
only
know how
want
to
them
govern.
here. As somebody said this, maybe it was you, that we only want them here when they're gentrifying, and that's been my quote. So, it's like if they are here and they go to Ford Field and litter the streets and urinate in public and do whatever kinds of things they do while drunk and get into brawls, we're like, cool, at least they're bringing in business. But when they're here fighting for Black lives, all of a sudden it becomes problematic.
We have, let me tell you, we have like a whole caravan of people who like give water and food to the protesters. We even have people who walk around with hand sanitizer to make sure people's hands are clean, and like people who pick up trash. There's like a whole team of people collecting trash. And so, you know, it's really striking to say to people who are really intentionally coming into this community, fighting alongside of us and treating us like decent, that we have a problem with them. Yeah.
Tristan, I want to ask the question around quote unquote isolated instances of police brutality in the city of Detroit. There are folks, specifically the mayor said, this morning on Detroit Today with Stephen Henderson, that Detroit doesn't have the kind of issues that other cities have when it comes to how we are policed in the city of Detroit. He said that when he goes to meetings, folks are always asking for, more police and faster response time and more money to be allocated toward police. Does Detroit have a police brutality issue or not?
I think it does. Definitely people have stories about that. I could tell you some of my own stories. But don't believe me. Believe the $20 million in settlements that we do. So even if you don't want to believe me, I'm begging. Well, what's that about? We just feel like handing out money? Is that what we are? Okay, yeah. Yeah,
No, I
because
guess,
we pay for things that's not a problem, right?
yeah, that makes a
I was
very
just going to show you that. Like, see, look. Thank you.
This is Authentically Detroit, everybody. So you're going to hear the protesters. You're going to hear Tristan on the streets, as well as sirens and folks taking care of the protesters. So we ask that you bear with us. Donna, your question?
I have so many questions for Tristan. I don't even know where to begin. But I want to talk about police violence because it seems to me as though we've seen a tiny bit of that during this protest. So while I'm hearing people say that there is no violence or the police do not behave inappropriately, have police been appropriate with, even, let's take aside the officer who drove the car into the crowd, have police been behaving well during this protest that's gone on for 32 days or whatever?
Tristan, you gotta unmute yourself, Tristan, so we can hear you.
Oh no, it was also because there were like 1,000 honking hands. So, but no, I think I'm sorry, Donna. You asking about police brutality, and I think
during the protest, and I'm wondering how the police have behaved and treated you all while protesting.
Yeah, well, we had a tribunal last week where we talked about that. We had over 20 people give individualized testimony, and it's been absolutely atrocious. What we see is really how terrible of a culture the police department is, that allows for police officers to be so personally vicious, because we've seen police officers be completely antagonistic to individual protesters, even, giving personal insults. And I think that that's highly problematic and unprofessional. People are
personal insult. Explain that.
Oh, like I'll give you a perfect example. Like I always show people my shoes, and so the original Friday night, I went downtown because people were still there, and I was like, "Hey, just checking people out." And the police officer was like, "Hey, like, you gotta go over there, go over there." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go over there." And I'm with a friend, Adam, who's lives in Hamtramck. He's like, "What are you doing here, white boy? You don't even live here." Of course, it was a white police officer who said that he may not live here.
You
And then he
can't
was
call
like,
them.
"Yeah," and then he like talked about my shoes. He was like, "Oh, your shoes look like they're shoes that third graders have." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's very unprofessional of you, Officer Ogilvy." I just made up a name. And he was like, "Oh, you talking shit, but you walking away." I'm like, "Yes, because I was given an order to walk away." Also, are you really having this exchange with me? You're a police officer with a gun, and you're trying to goat me to having a physical altercation with you?
Wow. That wow. Tristan, I got to tell you that, looking at the video from last night, for folk to catch folks up, there was an incident Sunday night in the city of Detroit, in Southwest Detroit, where a police cruiser sort of drove through a crowd of protesters. um, I was grieved and am grieved at the action of that police officer, as well as the comments subsequent by the mayor and police chief slash deputy mayor here in the city of Detroit. Do you know what happened last night in Southwest?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of reports, and I caught up to the rally because I was like actually at Penn Park where the protesters were marching, because that's where we began, and so they were marching to Penn Park to end. And so what happened was, when they were going down Vernon, the police created a blockade that tried to get them onto Dick's Highway. And we weren't causing any issues, and we were literally on our way to wrap up the rally. And so people continued to go down Vernon, and the way that they went down Vernon, they had to squeeze through individually, like one by one, into the crevice of where the cars were at, like through the blockade. And it was in the process of squeezing through police officers that a group of people, put themselves in front of the squad cars to make sure that the cars knew people were walking. And the squad cars began tipping, and then it started to rev its engine up as people were walking through. And as you see from the video, people are, saying to the guy, like, "Hey, we're still walking through," and he like floors it. And that's when you see 4 or 5 people just immediately get knocked off to the side. There's this young man, Trindale. I'm so glad he like moved out the way, because he could have easily got ran over by the car, because the officer accelerates the second time. And so there are 2 young black people by the name of Jay Bass and Ja T, who are in the front of the cruiser because they're kind of stuck through the motion. And then he pulls off again, and that's when he like pulls off and swerves to like kick them off the car. And we were lucky that no one died yesterday. And the vibe of what happened with that police officer and that cruiser didn't match the vibe of the march throughout that whole period, which was peaceful and no issue.
Yeah. The video is really, really disturbing. Really disturbing. And, it kind of gives power to the concept that somebody other than police should be investigating police misconduct when there's an accusation or when there's evidence, because I'm hardly interested in what Chief Craig says about his police department. I want to know what an independent authority does. I've been in a conversation with State Senator Stephanie Chang about setting up an authority at the state. Do you think that in addition to reallocating some funds, setting up a state authority that would investigate accusations of misconduct would help? And you're on mute.
I think it would help, but here's the thing. One, I think there needs to be a statewide database so that when officers do have issues of police brutality, that record is public and publicly known, because we've seen too many occasions where a police officer can jump from one district to another. But I think that is really important that there's an independent investigation in order to make sure that there's no like nepotism or in the the situation with cops, who like are looking out for each other and are partial to each other, not having the ability to do what's wrong in terms of not doing a full investigation because that's their friend or that's their colleague.
A teacher who engages in misconduct cannot simply go from one school to the next. A doctor who engages in malpractice cannot necessarily go from one hospital to the next. You can lose your license to teach or to provide medical care, or you can be debarred from being an attorney. I believe that losing the right to perform a profession should not only happen within the state, but it should be a national database that blocks people from working in that field. So I am in full agreement with that. This is something that some people and I have been talking about for a while that's now gaining popularity, and it gets really upsetting. But I do want to switch 1 minute, if I can, to ask you about what's going on in terms of other activists. Because whenever things like this happen, when you're getting a lot of recognition, attention, people now know your name, you're in the paper just about every day. And there are activists who I think have questioned whether or not this is work that you are legitimate. Don't lose. I don't want to lose you now. That you are legitimately doing, and there's people who question whether or not that you should be here. So can you respond to that?
Sure. I think so. I want to go back to yesterday because yesterday was a march and a rally that
Your connection,
on by more than
Okay.
20 organizations.
Tristan, we apologize. Your connection is a little shaky. We can't adequately make out what you are saying. So if we're going to ask you,
let me know when it gets better. I'm like walking.
Okay, that's better.
Okay. I just hit a dead spot. Sorry. But no, yesterday was a march and rally that showed Black and Brown unity. It was unity. Over 20 organizations standing together. Indigenous organizations representing undocumented immigrants, organizations representing labor, organizations representing youth and teachers, LGBTQ groups. So it was actually really powerful. I mean, what we've tried to do with this movement on this platform that we have is to elevate the voices that were here before. And as a person who's been active for over a decade in the city of Detroit, that's something that, I'm really concerned and conscious about. And so, there's going to be people who have disagreements, but I feel like if there are serious disagreements, they have to be things that we can work out seriously and in an effective way. Because if the main thing is the main thing, and that is making sure we get justice, we'll find a way to figure out how to get beyond our issues.
That makes me so happy to hear. And I want to just commend you because that's great leadership to not make it personal and to make it about the fight that we all have together. Because it's not about you and other activists. It is about, police versus the community when there is misconduct. And so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I know how it feels being a Detroiter and having your voice not heard, kind of feeling like you're just, screaming and no one can hear you. So the last thing that I want to do is create that, but I also know where some of that frustration and anger comes from. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Hey, Tristan, I want to ask you a question. You said that you've been out in the streets for 32 days straight protesting. I have not been in the streets protesting just as a form of self-care and being, still afraid of COVID-19. I'm wondering, in all of your activism and in all of your advocacy, can you talk to us a little bit about how you care for yourself in all of this work?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I take time. Thankfully, I have a great team of young people who are fresh in organizing and some people who are seasoned, to help carry the work. As they say, dream work makes the team work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it would be remiss for me to pretend like it's all on me. And so, you know, it allows me to be able to take care of myself when I need to take a break. And that's likewise, you know, we try to step up for each other. And that's the beautiful thing about this moment is there's so many people involved. We can actually do that. We can actually say, hey, take a day, make sure you're okay so that you can fight again tomorrow.
Make sure you're okay so we can fight again tomorrow.
That's
Donna,
right.
do you have any wrap-up questions?
Yes. When is this going to end? When are you going to stop marching? When will you know? I have two questions, actually.
Go for it.
Before I get to that, I want to ask you about your negotiations with the mayor, with the city of Detroit. Where does that stand? Because I know you sat down with a list of demands with the mayor.
Well, how do I describe that? Would I call it a negotiation? That's an interesting term, actually. Because I feel like in order for it to be a true negotiation, right, that both sides have to come on equitable terms. Yeah, we had originally asked for the mayor to do a public meeting with the protesters. Because I think as a person who gets paid a lot of money to be mayor of a city, democracy might be an ugly thing, but it's a thing nonetheless that he should be obligated to engage in. And the meeting was, to be frank, more of a sizing up than a negotiation of sorts. I hope that I made clear where this movement stood and our intransigent stance on fighting for justice. But it was a little disheartening to see the ways in which he like deflects questions. He tries to committee things to death. Anyway, one thing that really struck out to me was, you know, we were asking for the charges to be dropped, and he was like, "Oh, I could do that." He's like, "I got to review them." I was like, "You review all of them? Like you're gonna personally decide who gets off and who doesn't?" And he was like, "Well, yeah." And I was like, "Well, when is that gonna happen? You gonna give me a date?" And he was like, "Oh," at first he just didn't. And so it was a little striking how disingenuous some of the exchange we were having was.
Thank you. So what does success? I'm going, Orlando.
I was just going to say is also not surprising. I saw a quote today that said, the heart of politics or something along this line is delaying a decision until no one cares anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so how long are you planning on caring in this way?
For as long as we can. I mean, every day I ask these young people, y'all tired yet? Because I'm tired. And they're like, we all here till justice. And they really mean it. And that's what's different.
What does justice look like? Tell us what justice looks like, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, I think justice looks like when cops are involved in incidents of police brutality, that they're fired and actually persecuted, that they actually have to pay the price for abusing their badge. It looks like an end to actually ones that don't work. Because that's the problem with green and facial recognition is actually a big waste of resources.
So you're looking for policy. You're looking for absolute policy change at the Detroit police level to hold police officers accountable, to get rid of green light. What else?
We're talking about making sure that we're doing enough for renters in the state of Detroit as well as demands.
We're sorry about the technical difficulties to our listeners.
The state of Detroit is
looks like
another thing.
Tristan
you know what I think? I think if we could have a specific demand, like take the $20 million in change or whatever it is that they budget for lawsuit settlements and invest those in housing in the community, that'd be a good first start, right? Just have a concrete demand and say, listen, you can do this and you can work on making sure that the officers, or let the unions get insured, so the unions can actually be the entities that pay these costs, okay? Because if the unions themselves have to pay these settlement costs, then the unions will be more accountable and more thoughtful about who they protect. Right now, the citizens of Detroit bear the cost. And so I think that I'm wondering if having some specifics like that, that people see as actionable, are a good first step, or whether people feel as though we have to use this moment to go all the way and, you know, get more.
Yeah, I think, again, the way I talk about defunding is that something that the community needs to decide. And I actually think we could get really creative with all the money. One of the things that's problematic is how little we know about the budget that the police have, what they actually use it for. There's, really no transparency in that department. And so if we could start with that, then we can start to make decisions about how we're reallocating money for housing. Or how about this? Make sure there's enough street lights even. Just basic things. Making sure that people don't go without water, or, that people, basic necessities, that we actually invest in neighborhoods, all of them, in community centers for young people. Yeah, I think we could do a lot. And my motto is, while we have the momentum, because who knows for how long, let's.
But there's going to be that, and I think this is not me being, I think there's this period of time where the momentum is high, and that's when you have the maximum ability to negotiate. And knowing how to perceive when that time is important, because we don't want people to lose attention, and then all of a sudden that ability to strike momentum is higher. Have you really been looking at that? Assessing?
I think, so the way that we've tried to engage with that question is to, first off, have concrete demands that we can, fight to achieve. And so we've been really focused on facial recognition. We know the budget is coming up for the city of Detroit. So defunding the police, like, this is our moment to start to further concretize those demands in terms of where those resources can go. And so we're figuring out the best ways that we can keep the momentum going by making sure that it's very focused, right? Hence, also our fight to get the charges dropped against all protesters.
Yeah. Getting the charges dropped.
Concrete things that,
Yeah, I agree. I hope that we can talk to you some other time about what some of those concrete things may be. I know it's a community thing, but getting creative is the important thing, and making sure that there is the thing that almost everybody in this community can agree on seems like it's going to be really important. The most fun. So I listen, we really want to thank you, Tristan, because
thank you for coming on, Tristan.
We've never had anybody come on while they're working and you you're protesting and have not missed a beat. So, I mean, you must be in excellent shape. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I am now. And you know what? My body needed it.
What'd you say?
I said my quarantine body needed the workout too.
Tristan, thank you so much. We will be happy to have you on again if you're willing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you, Tristan.
You too.
All right.
So, what a discussion. I'm really interested in having him back on to talk about the sustainability of some of the changes that we have seen during quarantine, like in a moratorium on tax foreclosures, water being on, and evictions being halted, but now, getting ready to start back up. So I think that his work is really just beginning as some of these things begin to take hold again as we move toward opening up.
Yeah, there's people who are idealists and pragmatists, right?
Yeah.
And I tend to be more along the lines of the pragmatist.
I do.
But No, I do.
Oh,
So it might be a Virgo thing, Orlando,
yeah.
but I'm like pragmatic. I'm like, okay, what can we get? I'm always trying to reach for that thing that we can do that will be a game changer. And so, for example, taking that lawsuit settlement money out of the budget and placing it and saying, you know what, we're going to do it. The pension fund is going to have to borrow money to pay for this, or the union is going to have to borrow money to pay for officer misconduct, takes the burden off of the taxpayers and puts it onto the police officers themselves who have done the damage. The challenge is, if you talk about suing individual police officers, that's great, but since they don't make a whole lot of money, you're not going to get much. Now, some people have said every police officer should become insured, and that's how we'll do it. And I'm down with that too. I think, though, if you made the unions become insured and you made the unions be the entity
that's right.
Unions would then collectively be willing to end that wall of silence. And if you took
and
that
discipline, it actually discipline, real
that's
discipline.
right. You know what? Because you're costing me money.
That's right.
So I think then that you could take those dollars that you're paying police officers off with, or paying victims off with, and reinvest them in some of the causes. Those are the kinds of changes that almost seem like everybody could agree with that.
Yeah. You know what? I just want to re-emphasize and submit my request for leadership in this very Black and brown city to think about the way you use language, to think about the rhetoric that you put out there, and to not do what is politically expedient for you to remain in power, but to just do and say what's right. I am so upset by the actions of that police officer last night and the reaction that we are getting from the leadership here in this city. It is appalling, and it is disgusting to me as a lifelong Detroiter. So
well, it's appalling, and it's disgusting, and it's also revealing. Yeah. And I think that where you stand in times of crisis ends up following you when that crisis has abated. Yeah. People are going to look, where did our leaders stand? And I think that sometimes you have to read the room. And I'm not sure that the police chief and the mayor are reading the room well enough to understand that there is no good reason to plow a car through people, even if you couldn't say anything. And then to retread that tired argument about these people aren't from this community is so offensive to me. That's the
I like your rebuttal. Well, how many officers ask that question?
You know, here you talk about all people matter. I mean, I'm sorry, power to the people. And you say that because you want to be inclusive, but we don't want to be inclusive in our marches. And, you know, back in the 1960s, when white people marched with Black people, there was a term that was used for them. And we can't use one of those words in polite society anymore, but it starts with an N, and lover, right? And, you know, in lover, right? And
we can say that.
You know, okay, well, I'm going to say it, but, you know, I don't want to offend anybody, but white people were called nigger lovers if they supported Black people. Yeah. And I think it's important for us to understand the context in which we now have a specific
derivative of that.
A type of white person, and the type of white person that the mayor and the police chief are opposed to is not anybody coming into the city of Detroit, not even anybody working in the city of Detroit. It is the person who comes here to support Black Lives Matter. And it just resonates to me in that way. And that's the reason it's so upsetting.
That is an amazing parallel and an amazing drawback. And it makes so much sense. And, you know, again, I would say this because, you know, folks will argue that we have a Black police chief, but I want to say that there are many Black mouthpieces for the system of white supremacy and oppression. Having a Black mouthpiece or a Black representative does not mean anything when that bridge to the citizen, the person closest to the problem that's experiencing a problem, it doesn't matter.
Or sometimes it does, because the Blackness is instrumental in whatever you're trying to achieve. Yep. Every emergency manager in the city of Detroit was Black, and that was not by accident. That was their Blackness was instrumental in our oppression, because it's so much harder. You know, I'm not going to get into it, but I've just been among Black people celebrating people because they belong to the same fraternity, even when they come here as an emergency manager and not really understanding that the frat doesn't matter in the city and the fraternity does not represent everybody in our community.
Yeah.
So I actually have to wind it up today because today is my son's 25th birthday. Shout out to
That's
Philip.
the first shout out. Shout out to Philip.
For his 25th birthday. He has been living in LA, just hanging on and doing great things, mostly by himself. But today he is in Long Beach with a couple of friends, and by a couple I mean two, celebrating.
I would like to shout out Stephen Henderson for a great interview with Mayor Mike Duggan and Senator Stabenow and our governor this morning on Detroit Today. Stephen Henderson did not let up on the mayor. He really pressed him, and I was proud of him during that interview. Also, Donna and myself will be appearing to June 30th, tomorrow, with Building the Engine for Community Development to hear stories of gentrification from neighbors in different neighborhoods in the city as well. We're going to hear from developers, and we're going to hear from some folks to offer just, critical analysis of their sense of what's happening in the city. So that will be on Facebook Live from the Building the Engine of Community Development Facebook page.
Yes, I'm really excited about that as well.
I am too, as well. So if you have stories or any topics that you want to hear us discuss on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up at our socials at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. That's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Catch the wave.